interviewing famed Trends Forecaster Gerald Celente. Gerald, nice to be talking with you again.
Thanks for having me.
And my big topic today is with a election looming and with impeachment hearings and with the debates on television, nationwide coverage. If Trump is reelected, will anything change economically for the better? And if he isn't elected, would a new administration do anything better with what you say is clearly a failing economy?
Well, when we look at, tracking trends is an understanding of where we are, how we got here, and where we're going. So let's look at Trump and where we are and how we got here. The equity markets are doing great. They're up over some 40% since he got elected, but it hasn't trickled down to the general economy.
Right.
And when you look at the Tax Policy Center's report on his tax cuts, it basically well over 80% of it went to the 1%.
Mm-hmm.
So it hasn't generated the growth that was promised. And when you look at the data coming out, and it's all in our Trends Journal, about how 70% of the people are having difficulty paying, bills and on and on and on. And real wages have basically stagnated. And so it's not really an improvement for the general economy. On the Trump end, we believe that although the Federal Reserve says that they're going to be holding interest rates and not lowering them right now and be waiting to see what's going to happen, I'm forecasting that we're going to be at this time next year at zero to negative interest rate policy. So they're going to continue to artificially prop up the economy, but really they're just propping up the equity markets, as the Federal Reserve is already doing with the repo markets, the overnight lending markets, where the gamblers, the Wall Street gang, gets their money to gamble the next day. According to the latest reports that have come out since September 17th to now, they've pumped in over $3 trillion into the repo markets. So they're pumping them up artificially to keep the game going. And that's all it is. It's a game. Because when you look at the price earnings ratios of the stocks, they're at, they're over 26 when a solid number is around 16. So it's being artificially propped up. If the Democrats get in, they're not giving any solutions or giving any advice on how to boost the economy.
All right. Well,
Well,
first of all, if Trump is reelected, then you don't expect anything to change
no,
economically. Okay.
no.
So if he loses, the Democrats get in, then what?
It's going to be a probably more of the same, but less. People need to understand one thing, that most politicians that run for office are pathological liars. They promise things knowing that they can't deliver, and they do it in such a great way that people believe them. And there's no greater one than the Nobel Peace of Crap Prize winner Barack Obama. And you look at his first day in office, folks, I'm going to close Guantanamo by the end of this year. That was 2009. Guantanamo's still open, and people give excuses. Well, he couldn't do it because they wouldn't let him. Wait a minute. He had a Democratic Congress for 2 terms. And he started the war in Libya, Syria, Afghan troop surge. They're pathological liars. They're great at it. So going to the Democrats, all they're coming up with is, I'm going to give you free education, I'll give you free health care, but they're not coming up with anything on how to build the economy. And that's essential, and it's being lost. So when they do get in, none of those things are going to happen, and they'll still give the money to the Wall Street gang like the Democrats have done and the Republicans have done. So it will be more of the same, but different.
All right. Next question. Let's assume there's a Democrat idealist who gets in, doesn't play politics, isn't a pathological liar. He really tries to fix the economy. Isn't it, according to your own predictions of trends, that it's beyond the control of even a do-gooder in the office of the presidency?
Not really, no. If it's a redistribution and a rebuilding. So, for example, they just passed, the Democrats, by the way, the National Authorization Act, that robs us more of our freedoms. and bills the military intelligence budget, which when you put the two of them together is over $1 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at all the wars that are being fought with and the trillions being wasted, the billions and trillions being wasted. It's a redirection of the resources back into the economy. So if we had, you go back to the Great Depression, it was the WPA, the Work Progress Administration, that most people, of course, other than the older cats, don't remember. And there's such things as the Hoover Dam, the Taconic Parkway, the Whitestone Bridge, and on and on and on and all over the country. So if you had that kind of a movement that goes back into building the economy in a positive way, not by going deeper in debt, but by a redistribution of wasted trillions, then you can rebuild the economy.
But
And
what I'm getting at though is, you predicted that the greatest depression by 2021. So isn't it beyond anyone's control, even if they reinvest, even if they have a modern day WPA program, it's not fixable, is it?
yes, it is. It is fixable. But the money has to be redistributed. It can't go to the 1%. It's putting back in place the antitrust legislation that
Mm-hmm.
prevented the Home Depots and the Staples and the CVS's. It used to, you cannot put all the money just onto the top. It could ease the pain of the greatest depression if the money went back into the general society.
What
But
it's
the way it's going now, the greatest depression is on the way.
All right, but what you're saying is if fixes that could be put in, it would prevent the greatest depression or just ease the pain of the Great Depression.
It would greatly ease the pain of the greatest depression because it's global. It's a global slowdown.
Also, apropos to this, you've said a number of times, as many others have, that the 21st century belongs to China. Now, assuming that we're headed towards a crash, Great Depression, Greatest Depression, would not China be just as adversely affected?
Oh, they will be. But they have a lot further to go down than we do. So, for example, when you listen to the regular media, China just had its worst GDP numbers, in what, 30 years. But what was their GDP growth? 6%.
Mm-hmm.
China's retail sales are down from 7.8% to 7.2% in October from the month before. 7.2% growth. What's the United States retail sales growth? 0.3%. So they have a lot further to go. So, yes, their economy is going to slow down. They're going to have a terrible time because they have 1.4 billion people. They have $40 trillion in debt. They have a debt to GDP ratio of over 300. But what they're also doing is they're taking measures in understanding what's going to happen, in trying to build it with their bridge and road initiative by getting involved in other nations. So they know it's coming, but they're taking measures to ease it so it won't be as bad as it will be. And they only could do so much again because it's way overbuilt, too much debt, and it's going to be hardship there as well as anywhere else.
What you
But
seem
again, this doesn't go on forever. It has a cycle. And so when they get out of the cycle, they move back up again.
what you seem to be saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's U.S. economic policies, corporate policies, and all that of the past 30, 40 years that have brought us to this stage, so that is the primary reason why we're heading towards the greatest depression, not anything beyond the U.S., pretty much focused on U.S. policy,
Yeah.
causing the greatest depression.
And the war policy. How many, what is it? Depending on whose numbers you look at, since the war on terror began, what, $8 trillion, $10 trillion? That's real money. And so it's a waste of money. So it's America's antitrust policies and its pro-war policies that got us into this situation. And you have to, again, look at it globally. Look what's going on around the world: Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, uh, Bolivia, Colombia, Chile,
Right.
Venezuela, Zimbabwe, France. People taking to the streets because all the money is at the top and nothing's being filtered down to the bottom.
All
So
right.
when I call it the Greatest Depression and why it's going to be worse, you go back to the Great Depression, 1930. How many people were on the planet? 2 billion. How many did we add in 90 years? 5.5 billion.
Right.
Where are they going to get jobs? Oh, now we have all this new technology, robotics, artificial intelligence, all of your apps getting rid of, we don't need cashiers anymore, all these jobs leaving, and all the people coming onto the planet. So when I talk about the Greatest Depression, the implications are going to be far greater than what anyone could imagine.
All right. You also say it's cyclical. It won't last forever. If we pull out of it and the globe recovers, it'll still be China's century, will it not, to the great detriment of the U.S.?
Oh, yeah, it's China's century. There's no question about it to us. Again, the business of China is business. The business of America is war. And if you don't believe me, ask or listen to what General Dwight D. Eisenhower, five-star general, supreme commander of the Allied forces in World War II, in his farewell address, I believe it was January 20th, 1961, that the military-industrial complex is robbing the nation of the genius of the scientists, the sweat of the laborers, and the future of the children. Here we are. So the whole policy has to reverse. And we don't have that kind of reversal going in now. You
But
have even people like so-called liberals and left-wingers like Elizabeth Warren, who's running on the Democratic slate for president, who and Bernie Sanders, who want to get rid of that dictator down there in Venezuela. So the movement isn't going in that direction.
but again, if because of the global trends, even if we reverse a lot of these destructive policies, won't it still be China's century? And if it is, are we going to become a has-been nation, both economically, militarily, a shadow of our former self, like just what happened to the British Empire?
Yeah, it's exactly what's going to happen.
And there's
And
no
they're
way around that. There's no way around that.
well, there is a way around it again, but they're not going to do it. It's not in the psychology of the nation. The things I'm talking about can reverse that. You become more of a self-sustaining society. We don't have to buy. Oh, I get a kick out of the Retail Federation, how terrible it is that, prices might go up if all of a sudden we start getting products made over here and we don't get 96% of our clothing made overseas in slave labor countries.
Right.
America was a middle class society because we had middle class jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to change the policy. I get a kick also out of the so-called liberals who keep talking about buy local, buy local, buy local. Great. How about buying national? No, 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 no. We're not going to do that because Levi and Apple and Nike, they got to get their products made cheaply so they can make more money and sell it to us.
So, heading into the next decade, uh, you don't see much hope of us reversing these destructive policies. And since there isn't much hope of that, you don't see much hope of us pulling out of the greatest depression with any kind of a reasonable recovery.
Not with the two parties running and destroying the nation. The murderers and the thieves, by their deeds you shall know them. How many more wars do they have to start based on lies and foreign entanglements and regime overthrow? And that's on the money side and on the murder side rather, and on the money side. This isn't capitalism, as they all complain that these left wingers are going to bring socialism. In capitalism, there's no such thing as too big to fail. And again, in the repo markets, pumping in $3 trillion since September. And then, according to the Levy Institute that just came out recently, since 2008 to 2010, the Federal Reserve pumped in $29 trillion into the bankster system to artificially prop it up. So with the current group of murderers and thieves in, nothing is going to change. It will only get much worse.
Among the Democratic contenders, you mentioned before that you liked Tulsi Gabbard. Anyone else?
No, that's about it. And she's on the fence with me too. She votes for they voted unanimously, the Democratic Party, against Trump's withdrawal of troops out of Syria. Oh, what are we abandoning the Kurds? Get it in your head. You're illegally in another country. You have no business being there. And they're only, oh, I fight ISIS. Stop with this ISIS stuff. You heard Trump say it's about oil. And as I've always been saying, you'd think we'd be in the Middle East if their major export was broccoli. So she's the only one speaking out against it, but she goes party line as well, as she did with the authorization to use military force that was just reinstated by the Democratic Party just about unanimously a few days ago.
All right, we're in our second week of impeachment hearings as we speak today. Do you predict he will be formally impeached and removed in the Senate?
I don't believe he'll be removed at all if he's formally impeached, and it's just a total waste of time. And this could also have a negative effect on the equity markets, as it did when Bill Clinton went through the impeachment process. And the equity markets, as I said, are way overvalued, and something like this could be very disruptive because Trump is seen as very pro-business, particularly compared to the contenders in the Democratic Party. And I don't see any way that the Senate, that is majority now ruled by the Republicans, is going to get a 2/3 vote to make it legal to get him out of there, because what are they going to do? Who are they going to put in? So I don't see that happening.
My take on it is this, Gerald, that unless the political winds shift drastically and they come up with some smoking gun which is so egregious that it'll turn all sides against Trump, there is no chance that the Republican senators are going to fold.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
It doesn't seem likely that there's
Yeah.
much beyond what they've manufactured already as a reason to impeach and remove.
And the interesting thing about this whole impeachment process, what's it about? Trump trying to bribe the guy who's president of Ukraine to find out the dirt that really happened, how Joe Biden's little boy Hunter got a $3 million deal, plus Secretary of State John Kerry's stepson-in-law, Christopher Hines of the Hines 57 group, got also a deal with Burisma Energy, when these boys know nothing about the business and probably never been to Ukraine. And that's what this is all about. That's criminal to me.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting how all these principled, idealistic Democrats who are calling for Trump's hanging have no problem with Biden's son, what went on there as he was sitting as vice president of the U.S.
That's what I'm saying.
Not a peep about that.
Not a peep. And then the other disgusting part to me about it is $500 million of our money, $500 million of our money that Trump was holding back, that was going to go to the military-industrial complex. Mm-hmm. That's the big crime. So that they could sell more weapons of destruction to Ukraine, and they could kill more people and keep the war going.
Wrapping it up now, Gerald, I don't know what your feelings are about all these so-called conspiracy theories about the deep state's control of what's really going on in Washington. Some people say that's what's really behind this move to remove Trump. What's your take on that? Who's behind it? Who's controlling the strings behind the curtain?
The people that you see. It's right in front of everybody's eyes. Trump was never a member of the club. He wasn't a Harvard, Princeton, Yale boy. He was never, except, matter of fact, the story is that he built that Mar-a-Lago because they wouldn't let him into the White Shoe Boy place down in Florida.
Yeah.
So he's never been a member of the club, and they want him out of the club. And he's taken over the club, and they want him out. It's in front of everybody's eyes. Why did the media waste 3 years on Russiagate? And it worked perfectly because most Americans now hate the Russians And again, thanks to Trump, we also hate the Iranians. So
Yeah.
he's in his own camp of hate. And so, but I believe that there is definitely a movement to get him out of there, and it comes from the inside establishment, i.e., the deep state.
All right, but Gerald, there's those who argue about or can't figure out why these people would be trying to remove him since Trump has really done well for the corporations. You know, they're riding high in the stock market. He's given them the huge tax breaks. So why oust somebody who's been doing their bidding?
Well, again, that's why he's still in there. He does have the corporate support in a lot of ways, and but it's about politics. And I mentioned Eisenhower before. Eisenhower said, to paraphrase what he said, any man seeking the office is either insane or crazy, and that's what these people are. They're egomaniacs. They're narcissists. They're pathological liars. They're psychopaths, sociopaths. That's who's running and ruining our nation. And by their deeds, again, you shall know them.
Gerald Celente, thanks once again for being with us and for these latest insights on what direction we're heading in going into the election and beyond. Thanks very much for being with us.
Hey, thank you, Larry.
Okay.